Aye.
Thank you. Then I'd like to call the meeting to order for the procedural bylaw committee work. First item on the is the adoption of the agenda. Motion moved by Bill. Second by Jerry. Discussion. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof? None. Next item is the adoption of the minutes. Motion for that. Bruce, thank you. Good, Bill, thank you. All in favor? Motion carried, thank you. No deputations. Reports to the work on now. So the first item is the follow-up of the background information. Yes, would you like to read to that?
Sorry. So the committee at the last meeting had asked me to reach out to do a couple of things. The first one was to reach out to the EOWC clerks group to see which other upper tiers in that cluster actually place restrictions on who can hold office of warden and deputy warden. So that information is in there as some background. We reached out to all of them, and as you can see, none of the EOWC counties place restrictions on who can and cannot run for warden. We did also note the composition because some of them are simply just the mayors that come. But of those, as you can see here, there were, there was a number of them who actually had 2 members that were appointed to council. So even those that had the 2 members appointed to county council, there was no restrictions on who could run or who couldn't run as the warden and deputy warden. One interesting thing that we did find though was the county of Peterborough that has the 2 that come to county council from each lower tier. They do have a restriction that the warden and deputy warden cannot be from the same municipality. So that's something that the committee may want to consider placing in ours as well. If they do recommend that the county lift the restrictions on who can run for warden and deputy warden, there is the potential that you could have both the warden and deputy warden from the same municipality. So if you want to place a restriction on that, that's just something that the committee might want to consider as well.
Very good.
I know going through your background that when we have 2 members from the same lower tier, it's usually mayor and deputy mayor. Whereas North Frontenac, that's not the case. Historically, over the years, it's been just whoever is appointed as second member. Just to bring that to your attention.
So currently, I believe it's only the township of Frontenac Islands that actually appoints for the term of its council a deputy mayor. And that deputy mayor comes to county council. The other 3 townships send the mayor and then they appoint an alternate member, but that alternate member is appointed for the term of council.
Through you, Chair, I think I would agree with the addition of the line saying that that the warden and deputy warden should not come from the same municipality. I think generally, if I was consensus the last time, that we would like to change that everybody is available to be warden and deputy warden, but they perhaps it would be good to add a line that notwithstanding that both warden and deputy warden shall not be from the same municipality. That would be my recommendation to the committee.
I would certainly support that. I think that's certainly appropriate that we do that. I guess, I mean, I didn't hear all of the discussion last time, but I think historically the serving as the warden has been an honorary position, I think, and in some respects, it may still be of value to have a first choice as mayor. But if we're going to rotate through the lower tier, 4 lower tier municipalities, that seems one per each of the 4 years. If the mayor is either unwilling or unable to sit or attend the council for a variety of reasons, then could be the alternate in that township. But there may be some bias, although it wouldn't be, our bylaw might not restrict it, it might be out of precedent that we continue to appoint a mayor as a warden. I lost it. Sorry.
Yes.
Another comment?
Sure.
In that respect, I think that we should be looking at the warden from, I guess, from a background of merit rather than position. Understand what I'm trying to say? It's sometimes some wardens are, or sometimes the mayor is brand new at the political game where you may have an alternate or whatever who has been around for a long time and knows the system. Would be much better candidate as a warden.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting it has to be the mayor, but I think that it has been past the mayor. Necessary to say it's wrong, but I don't have a problem if there's an alternate that is elected from this council to, who isn't the mayor, to serve.
Just a point. I don't think we should refer to anybody, mainly us four, as alternates. I think what we should do is we should just open it up that all members of county council have access to being warden or deputy warden at election time. Because in actual fact, not to repeat things that were already said, I feel very strongly that why would you eliminate 50% of the people from not even being able to seek the position of warden or deputy warden right from the get-go? Because in actual fact, there may be value in having everybody compete for those positions, because I come from the old world, really old county, where the warden was selected on an election basis, but there were 29 county councilors at that time and 13 or 14 townships, and that the candidates who wanted to be warden actually went out and visited all of the municipalities to get their support there. So I'm not suggesting that would be that big a deal today because there's only 4 of us, 4 townships, but I just feel strongly that everybody should have an opportunity and let the chips fall where they may.
It's certainly not something I feel that strongly about, so it's comfortable with whatever way it goes.
Sorry, and then the other one was the electronic participation. So I did reach out to all of the EOWC clerks groups again to see what they were doing in terms of placing any criteria or restrictions around electronic participation. So there is a chart there, and I do have that chart because it is part of the roundtable discussion. So I did actually print a larger copy of that chart out so that you can easily reference it when we come to that under the roundtable discussion. But as you can see there's a couple of municipalities that have not yet looked at this provision of electronic participation, and those that have, it really is, you know, a mix of some placing restrictions on them and some not. So the chart that I have handed out for the roundtable, it shows which restrictions are placed that they've opted to place on their councillors. So again, that is just for council's consideration under the roundtable discussion. And that was the basis of that report, to just bring some background information on the research that staff had done since the last meeting.
I guess if there's any other questions or discussion of that, I mean, I'm assuming that's going to fall into our roundtable discussion. as well. So perhaps we may just move into that roundtable discussion at this point. And again, I think as I did the last time, if members are comfortable, just speak up as you wish, as long as you're not interfering with somebody else. And if it gets out of hand, I'll try to bring this back to order. Bill gets too talkative.
Pardon me?
Sir, I was just saying, nice day with the Bill.
I was listening. I was looking down.
Well, can I start out with comment then?
Certainly.
Well, in our local circumstance, we're trying to get more people to participate in local politics. And as a result, we're probably going to have seasonal people who are going to run for office. And as a result of that, they're not going to be, they may live in Toronto, they could live wherever. And for them to, they may be appointed to Frontenac County Council by the current township council. So if that should happen, these people wouldn't have to, but they probably would want to participate electronically all the time, at least through the winter months when they're not here. So I think we should take that into consideration. It's a changing demographic that we're looking at down the road in the future. That's my comment.
It's a very worthwhile comment. I think as we look through some of the ways or some of the restrictions that for electronic participation, sometimes it was up to 3 meetings could be excused. Otherwise, there were a variety of other options that were available to members. But my own personal view is that we should be here unless there are extenuating circumstances or reason we can't.
The CEO has to work with these people. Do you have a comment?
I don't think that we've really had I think the more difficult part is the casual conversations and meeting and greeting, the process and day-to-day running of the municipality. I don't think has been affected. What gets missed is the collegiality part that doesn't happen in a Zoom call or a Teams call. Or whatever that's worth.
Mr. Chair, I'm wondering if the Municipal Act actually has done any work in regard to electronic meetings in the way of understanding the geography of the country that we're working with. What I mean by that is that I referenced a few years ago, all of the councillors up in one of the municipalities in Muskoka were cottage owners. They tried to hold council meetings in Toronto where they all lived. The Municipal Act actually dealt with that, where they said that all council meetings have to be held within the municipality where you're an elected representative. But I wonder how much influence new electronic information is going to change that view, because all of the taxpayers within that municipality or representatives would have access to that electronic information also, so they could participate in the meeting no matter where it was being held. And I'm just wondering if Jeanette can put any insight into that perspective.
So in terms of meetings, the municipal act states that it has to be in your municipality or it can be in an adjacent municipality. So for example, we would be able to hold a meeting in the city of Kingston, or who else is adjacent to us?
Lennox and Harrington, Minor,
Lennox and Abington would be
Redford.
adjacent to us. Well, Loyalist would be adjacent to us. So you can have it in your own municipality or an adjacent municipality. In terms of electronic participation, when you're actually not in the municipality, the meeting itself would likely need to be hosted by the county here and physically participating here. But those dialing in electronically, if the municipal act is silent, they have to actually be located in the municipality when they're dialing in. It has just provided municipalities with the option to now make this electronic participation permanent in terms of council members being able to be counted as quorum. So the municipal act changed a few years ago that did allow electronic participation, but it didn't allow those participating electronically to be counted as quorum. When COVID hit, they quickly acted to put these measures in place so that during an emergency, council members could participate electronically and be counted as quorum. And then during that same time frame, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing did some extenuating outreach to municipalities. And it was communicated to him that this electronic participation was working. It was allowing more people to participate. So that was when they opted to say, okay, so you can now put electronic participation into your procedural bylaw and have those members counted as quorum. So that's a little bit of the background of electronic participation, but they are silent in terms of, sorry if I'm hearing your question correctly. If a councillor participating electronically, do they have to be physically located in a municipality? It is silent on that, and I think you can see as one of the municipalities that we reached out to, the only criteria that they had placed on their councillors was that they had to be located within Canada. So Northumberland, the only criteria it places on its members if they participate electronically is that they have to be located in Canada. Does that
Yeah,
answer
no,
your
I
question?
think,
There goes Florida. You know.
Nobody knows where you are, Jerry.
Well, when you hear the ocean in the background,
Or the beach umbrella. So, just, I guess, to try to go over these, some sort of structure.
So perhaps the first piece that we can look at is, so there's a couple of things that have to happen. Number one, you have to make a decision on will there be criteria or will it be open to anybody? So that might be your first topic of conversation. And then the next topic of conversation is how are we going to address, for example, if a member is participating electronically and they lose connection, how are we going to address that? Does the meeting stop? Like, as I know that I think in some of these, it allows 15 minutes for that member to get reconnected. In other cases, it's just if you fall off the line, you're gone, and hopefully you get reconnected. And then there was another
But you
one that
can't
if
lose
you
quorum.
fell offline.
But you can't lose quorum.
No, you can't lose quorum.
oh, in
And again, there was another municipality that limited the number of people who could call in at any given meeting. So for example, I think it was 3, that no more than 3 could participate electronically. So in that case, it would be a first come, first served basis. So the first 3 who say, call in and say, I'm going to participate electronically. Anybody who calls in after that to say, I need to participate electronically would be told no. I'm not sure which one that was. It is set out in the
but I think, excuse me. I think except for weather events, you have a responsibility to let the clerk know whether or not you're going to be at the meeting, like physically at the meeting. A weather event's a different thing. You can't control that. But I agree, think that the counselor has a responsibility to contact the clerk.
Sorry, what I meant by that is that their procedural bylaw only allows a maximum of, I'm just trying to find which one it was, a maximum of 3, I believe it was, to participate electronically. So at any given council meeting, you could only have 3 people participating electronically. So if a councillor wanted to participate electronically for whatever reason, they would have to notify the clerk. But after 3, the 4th person would be told no.
that, how the people that have that restriction, how do we know the number of councillors that council had when they put a restriction of 3 on?
So just-
I saw somewhere in there where a member was expected to participate in person, but they were allowed 3 times in which they could automatically join in virtually. I didn't see any one of the ones where there were only 3 that were allowed. Perhaps I just read it.
Mr. Chair, is I think I think limiting the number of people, because if you, let's say there were 4 people that needed to be electronic for whatever the reason might be, who gets to determine the one that's out?
First come, first served.
It may be like a smorgasbord, buffet, the last one doesn't serve, but the, I think when numbers come in, you have to determine from what size of the body that you picked 3. Because 3 here would be, it would still leave us a quorum of 5 in body.
But during the pandemic, we've had meetings where we're all electronically connected to the meeting.
I think there was an exemption that was included in
Yeah.
most of the language that if, as long as there was a state of emergency declared, then all members of council could participate electronically.
I do recall on my way here, county council meeting before, when we actually run into a very severe freezing rainstorm when the highway was basically shut down. And we didn't have any means of electronic meetings then, but most of all of us from the north area just turned around whenever it was possible back home, but they basically canceled the meeting. But, there's going to be immediate emergencies come up where in actual fact the rules don't apply. In my opinion, reschedule a meeting.
So, sorry, I'm just trying to find it, and perhaps I was wrong. I thought I had read that somewhere, but perhaps not. But again, there's 2 different things you're looking at here. There's outside of the declared emergency. So what we're discussing here is electronic participation when we get back to normal. And we're no longer in a declared emergency. If we're in a declared emergency that requires physical distancing, that would be put into the procedural file. So right now, what we're really talking about is when we sort of go back to normal.
But I think we're concerned with unforeseen events like a weather condition or weather event. As Bill was referring to, like a nice storm or something.
It happens. And with climate change, it may happen more often.
And those events certainly could happen in different regions. I mean, we belong, you're in a totally different weather area than Bruce is, or I am possibly. You might have freezing rain or snow event that makes it unsafe to travel. That choose not to for good reasons. But I think where they're planned times where people, for one reason or another, realize that it is impractical for them to attend for a variety of reasons. They have another meeting following in their own township, so they physically can't make the drive to do, and they're able then to make arrangements with the clerk. That's fine. But I think there may be occasions where you get up in the morning, you're gonna flat tire in your vehicle, or people will start in cold weather conditions, or some other thing that's fairly sudden that you still may wish to be able to participate electronically, but by the time you get your tire fixed, you've lost the chance to attend. So there can be, I think, a variety of circumstances that could occur where we may want to allow members to participate electronically. I don't have, I would certainly expect that wherever possible, members make the effort to attend. That's what we're elected to do.
I think maybe that you hit on what the opening statement in that paragraph should be. And that is that there is an expectation for you to be in attendance in person, notwithstanding any immediate emergency, personal emergency, that you may participate electronically. You mentioned a flat tire, because when I got in the vehicle this morning, the notice came up that my right front tire was blowing air, so I just pull around and inflated before I came down here, so. Hope you weren't watching.
You may not get home.
Oh, yeah, no, it's fine.
In any event, I think there are certainly, I think there, we need to incorporate some flexibility into that. But there's an understanding that members are expected to be here rather than just choose not to drive down. It's a very long drive.
It's funny, you referenced another thing, is we had a counselor last night who was actually at Rideau Lake Conservation Office for a meeting that was happening at 7 o'clock or 7:30. And he participated in our council meeting all through from that location, and then he shut off because he had to go to the other meeting. So there are advantages also, like you say, if multi-appointments. And there has to be recognition that we need to take a vacation once in a while, but you may want to be, it may be very important for you to participate in an upcoming meeting, but if that meeting conflicts with your holiday session also.
I've done both, as you suggest. I've often been gone to the conservation boardroom to attend a library board meeting because the conservation is meeting immediately after. Just because I don't have physical time to commute between one or the other. This fall, I joined our township council meeting in Nova Scotia. So I happened to be there. It worked hopefully for me at that time. So I think there are times where we need to incorporate the flexibility or ensure there's enough flexibility to meet for our members.
Do we have a copy of anyone who has also set up the perimeters of video conferencing or whatever that we could look at and say, this will meet our needs, this statement here, rather than us trying to reinvent the wheel? Do we have access to anybody that's already done this?
So that's in the sheet that I handed out. So in the first column under criteria, it's basically a cut, copy, and paste of what's in the bylaw. So for example, from what I'm hearing from this council, if you look under the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville, under their bylaw, they have, while in-person participation shall remain the primary method of participation by members, electronic participation is available to members who deem it necessary to, due to, and then they've listed their criteria. You could list yours. There's also, so those are the examples of some of them. SDG, they list theirs as those A, B, and C. So that incorporates the requirement under an emergency. So A is the event of an emergency, similar to what we're in now, where we're in a pandemic situation. Their next one is as determined by the warden in consultation with the CAO and clerk that an electronic meeting of the full council is necessary. So if the warden feels that a full council meeting is required in electronically, but it's not, we're not necessarily in a declared emergency, such as a council meeting that may take half an hour, a joint council meeting that we've had in the past. So that could be a reason for participating electronically. And then for individual members of council, it's determined on a case-by-case basis by the warden for valid reasons, including illness or emergency. So in that situation, if a member of council feels that he or she has a valid reason, they can participate electronically, but they would need to have it go through the warden. So they would contact the warden and say, you know, I'm not well, or I have a flat tire, or whatever the situation may be, and I'd like to participate electronically. That's just theirs. I'm not saying that's the route to go, but that came out of their bylaw.
I don't know how others feel, but I'd rather hear from Jerry in Florida than not have him present at our meeting.
I'd rather be with Jerry.
True, except if you have to see Jerry sitting back in his bathing suit with
Yeah, that could go.
There are some limits.
Although it is Florida.
We don't want video.
Yeah, I just wondered.
Sorry, that was a bad image.
So I would remind the committee as well that because we are an upper tier, your lower tiers do have that option of appointing an alternate member to council. So for example, if a councillor is on vacation in Florida, you're reluctant to, you don't want it out of the country, there is the option for the township to send their alternate so that at least you have full participation by all municipalities. That's something that lower tiers don't have, which is one of the reasons why we opted not to research what the lower tiers or the lower tiers or single tier municipalities are doing, because we have some additional options in terms of upper tier, as well as we have a different geography than single tier. So
I like the idea of electronic participation, but I also think there has to be some exceptions to that. I don't think that we should conduct certain meetings electronically, vis-a-vis the inaugural meeting.
Yeah, and that's the Hastings County exception.
I think so too.
Or
They say
budget meetings, I think are.
Yeah. I think we have to lay out what the priority is, that notwithstanding that it's essential to pass a budget. But when someone's in the room here with us, you know, they're presenting their points on everything in regard to a budget, for example. Whereas when you're seeing someone on a screen, we don't know who's in the background, that sort of thing. So
Hastings says electronic participation will not be allowed at the inaugural session or at the meeting where the yearly budget is being considered unless the municipality or part thereof is under a declared emergency. So I think that covers what you're saying. So if Central Frontenac is experiencing flooding on Sharp Lake, you can get an exemption with that. Otherwise, the expectation is for you to be here.
right. And I think that's an understanding most people who are going to be on county council would accept, that there are certain parameters where you're expected to be there in person. And
couldn't that be determined even before the meeting is even beginning? Like you could say a week ahead, you have to be at this meeting because of this criteria. You could determine whether you wanted the full council there, if it was a budget item or.
So I have no authority, nor does the CAO, to override the procedural bylaw. So what
Right.
is in the procedural bylaw determines. It cannot be me to say, well, you really need to be at this meeting, so be here. I cannot override the procedural bylaw, which is why we're putting this in there.
Or can the ward.
that's why you have to lay it out in the procedural bylaw in the first place. Are there any, Chair, are there any other, in your opinion, Kelly, situations where it should almost be mandatory that we have be here in person? We mentioned two. Any others that you would suggest?
I don't know that it's worth putting in the procedural bylaw, but there may be committee meetings, for example, the hiring committee for the CAO, where in person or doing it remotely would be difficult, if not impractical. I can't think of any others. Can you do that? But other than the inaugural and the budget meeting?
No, but as the CAO did say, keep in mind that this does cover committees as well. So this would cover your committee, the CDAP committee. We have an accessibility advisory committee, and some of those members, face difficulties and disabilities that may prevent them from being able to attend a meeting. So Again, that would likely fall under the criteria of illness or deemed necessary, whatever criteria you put in there. But just to keep in mind that it does cover committees as well. But from a clerk perspective, and of course, my eye is always on your accountability and transparency to the public. So are you providing full accountability and transparency to the public if you're continually participating electronically when they can't see who's in the room with you? They can't see if somebody's passing you a piece of paper to say this, say this, say this. And I'm not saying that that does happen, but it's just one of my main focuses. Is that, you know, how are you best being accountable and transparent to the public that elected you and the public that you serve? So just keep that in your thoughts when you are considering these ideas.
I think proof that I don't think we should allow electronic participation in closed sessions. Just for that reason that you just said. We don't know who's in the background doing what. We're getting what information.
So when we did first start out with the closed sessions because of emergency, where there was a form that I had to confirm that no one is in the room with you. I anticipate that continues on when the closed session with that form clearly stated that you're swearing that nobody's in the room with you, that nobody's doing this. Other than that, you know, you as a counselor have to be accountable to be honest. I mean, it's for a closed session, even though the procedural bylaw states that closed material goes no further than your hands. We can't control if you're giving up to somebody in the public, and we would never know that unless it actually came to our attention. So there is a level of trust on part of
Level of trust. And the reason I said that because it'll happen in Carlton Place.
So I think my sense maybe is that members are comfortable with at least incorporating the part of Hastings County in that budget and inaugural meetings would be mandatory attendances. I think that's a reasonable place, a starting point. If we wish to add additional options where those might take place, then that's fine, but that's a starting point at least.
Or could we make it as, like, I agree with the Hastings part, that makes a lot of sense, but you could also add, or where a vote of the majority of council requires it. So, for example, top secret negotiations with the city of Kingston. The council may make that decision.
That could be done prior to, if we know that it's coming
Yeah.
up,
That's what I'm saying.
that this council meeting, we say, because of the agenda item that's coming up on our December meeting, it's mandatory for members to attend.
Or the other way, there will not be a phone-in option.
Okay.
You can't mandate that somebody.
Yeah,
comes.
Sorry, well,
I been thinking in regard to your comments about like hiring a CAO. I know in the past that we have actually interviewed candidates for positions that were remote, carried that on. So I don't know whether we would, by putting it in, like the hiring CAO, that we would be eliminating candidates that, you know, might be at Timbuktu or whatever. It might be highly
But the
qualified.
counselors need to be there. The candidate might be in Comox, BC.
Well, that's really where I was coming from. I'm wondering if we were going to eliminate that. I guess I follow your thinking.
so how do members feel about Kelly's suggestion? I think that to me that makes sense if council would prescribe that it's not there were no virtual participation for this item of this council meeting because of that reasonable.
It is reasonable.
Mr. Chair, I think we have to write down something. And then when we send it to the counselors, what's going to happen is there's going to be 4 more heads, 5 more heads that's going to look at it and say, well, you didn't think about this, and we may have to revise it, but we need to go with some kind of starting, and I think that's good enough.
I'm going to let Jeanette do the wordsmith.
So one thing that I would like to add, perhaps that wasn't added when we did look at definitions, because I'm noticing here now that it's not in the definitions, is the definition of inaugural meeting, because the inaugural meeting is not just the first meeting of the new term of council. The inaugural meeting is your first meeting of each year. So there's an inaugural meeting of the new session of council, which is what we've dealt with in procedural bylaw. But then each November or following the next election, currently it's each December, but following the next election, your first meeting in November will be your inaugural meeting, excuse me, of that year of council. And that is actually under the municipal act as well, because we are required to, if it's a one-year term for your head, you are required to appoint the warden at each inaugural meeting. So I would like to add the definition of inaugural session. So that would mean that that inaugural session each year, when you're actually appointing the warden and deputy warden, you all need to be present, which I think is
Okay.
the intent.
All right, that's fair. Your knowledge of the, does that mean that the lame duck session of a council is moving backwards?
I would have to check. Lame duck is after nominations day, so I don't have my book in front of me, but lame duck falls after nominations day. So nominations day next year is, I don't have my little calendar with me. I have this all. So once nomination day ends and we know exactly who has put their name in the hat for council, we will know if you're in lame duck or not.
Lame duck applies to county council also, does it not? So it's moving it back a month to be the inaugural meeting should move that time frame.
So
back
lame
also.
duck, as I noted, is based on who has submitted their nominations papers to run for council as of nominations day. Which I'm so sorry, I don't have.
Well, that's okay.
my
Question
daytime
out of the
away.
blue, so.
Good question.
So it's not based on when your new term starts, it's based on nominations day.
Lame duck is based on when,
The third Friday in August.
yeah,
So that would determine when you're in lame duck. So if, for example, in the third Friday of August, 5 of you ought to not run for council again, you're in lame duck. I think the magic number for us is 5, if 5 ought to not run for council.
yeah.
Is that a term in this act?
Lame duck?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if the word is in the municipal act, it's restrictions following nominations days, the technical term for it under the act, it's restrictions after nominations.
Yeah, and there's a whole bunch of caveats to that. For example, if you have 8 members of council or 9 members of council, we do it, and then 5 of them have been acclaimed to the new council, then in actual fact, you're not in a lame duck situation because you have the majority of council are going to move forward. So,
Well, they don't actually have to be acclaimed, as long as you're running, we know that there's a potential that that 2/3 will be coming back. So as long as you're running, you're not in lame duck. You don't have to be acclaimed. Lame duck is only when we absolutely know for certain that 2/3 will not come back. So if you're running for council, we don't know for certain that 2/3 will not come back.
there's no guarantee that you're going to come back either.
But that's not how, so let me just,
Section 275 of the act.
What's that?
Section 275 of the act.
Okay. All right. Anyway, I think what we're trying to do here is actually in the right in regard to electronic.
A question, procedural matters. The South Frontenac only carries their 2 normal votes, or each a vote, 1 vote for each member. It's only weighted when in budget matters. South Frontenac?
You hear at the county,
Yes.
so it's, you get 2 votes when you're in full council. So the majority, so when you're in committee of the whole, which is what the budget meetings are done in, it's only 1 vote for the mayor. And when you are in a regular council meeting and we move into committee of the whole, it's only one vote. But when we move out of committee of the whole, the mayor then gets 2 votes. So for example, if there's an item on the agenda that the mayor doesn't agree with, when it's voted on in committee of the whole, he only has 1 vote. But if that's a very close vote where it's won by 5 to 3, when we move out of committee of the whole, there's a resolution that council passes that the report of the committee of the whole be adopted and that the necessary actions and bylaws be enacted. At that point, the mayor could say, when that vote is called, he could say, I would like this item separated. So then that item that he didn't want to vote on is separated so that everything else is adopted by the committee of the whole. And then council votes on that one item separately. And then at that point, you could end up with a 4-4 where it's lost, or a, no, or maybe 5-4 where it's
9
actually
votes.
lost. So something that's actually passed in committee of the whole at the beginning of your meeting could end up not passing in the end. of the meeting.
The reason I raised that was I noted in some of the discussions, procedural matters where a 2/3 vote of council is required to waive the procedural bylaw, but in fact, in reality, it has to be 3/4.
Get a quorum.
Well, to get there's no such thing as 2/3. You can 5 of you, one person sitting on the fence say, well, I would might, but I might not vote for it. Does that get you the 3rd? You need 6 members.
So the person sitting on the fence, as we've noted, in the previous one is a no vote. You can't sit on the fence. You can say
You
I'm
need
sitting
5
on
and
the
a
fence,
third.
but
You
you're
need
a
5
no
and a
vote.
third to get your 2/3 vote.
But you do, but a 2/3 vote would be, if
6.
you're
Has
in
to be 6.
regular council, it would be this
Still has to
6.
be
And
6.
if
You
you're
can't
in
round down. a
committee of
person,
the whole,
round up.
where it's 8, you get the 2/3 of 8.
But still
And
has
if
to be
you're in-
6.
Yeah.
So realistically, it's 3/4 in one and 2/3 in the other.
It depends where the resolution's happening.
I was a math major and I'm confused.
But in actual fact, what you're saying, you have 9 votes that you could use.
Yes. Under some conditions in regular council, there are 9 votes.
Yeah.
But in committee of the whole, there's only 8 votes. So you need to have 6 voting in favor of an item in order to pass that 2/3 threshold.
But it's still 6 when there's 9 votes.
Yes. Anyway, I just.
Yeah,
just-
I'm not.
just-
So sometimes I get the calculator out.
Rubik's Cube here. We're just-
Well, it's 5 and a third.
No.
5 and a third is 2/3, technically 2/3, but I'd say that's the person sitting on the fence. Anyway, I don't want to belabor the point. I just. Okay, Jeanette, are we moving on?
So currently, right now, I have under restrictions, or sorry, under criteria for electronic participation, we have, we're going to put in that expectation that members of council make every effort to attend meetings in person. Electronic participation is available to the members who deem it necessary due to, and what criteria do you want to put around that? And then we would have a separate sentence that reflects Hastings, that says electronic participation will not be allowed at the inaugural session of council or at a meeting where the yearly budget is being considered, unless the municipality or part thereof is under a declared emergency, or where a vote of the majority of council requires it.
So basically Leeds and Granville plus Hastings plus the where council votes. That wording?
So again, it's what restrictions do you want to place? So do you want the same as Leeds Granville where it says illness, isolation, or other constraints? I just wondered what else others have here. Others are, so S, D, and G is on a case-by-case basis by the warden for valid reasons, including illness or an emergency situation. Prescott Russell is for medical reasons, illness, or in the event of a situation or pandemic. Renfrew, their restrictions are significant weather event across the entire county of Renfrew or within its local municipalities has been declared, or if the member is ill or injured, or the member has been duly appointed to an external advisory role such as AMA, Roma, FCM, or EORN, should they be performing the role within Canada. So it sounds again that Renfrew also places restrictions on you have to be in the country.
I think the purpose of naming the external boards that you may be appointed to, you might be at Roma when in actual fact the county council might conflict, so you could still participate with carrying out the role as an appointee to that organization. So I think that's important that statement be included as the reasons for it. But I'm not sure I agree with significant weather event across the entire county, because we could actually be dealing with 3 different weather patterns in Renfrew County because 100 miles.
Well, it does say or within its local municipalities.
Yeah, because we get a blizzard in North Frontenac and sun shining down in Kingston, so.
Bruce is still picking bananas.
Yeah.
So on another note to your comments, Councillor McDonald, in terms of participation at external advisory roles such as AMO or Roma, just a little bit of background. Council had opted for a number of years to cancel the August meeting simply because it fell on the 3rd Wednesday of the month, which is when AMO always happened. So a number of councillors were not able to attend because they were at AMO. So that was the reason behind the August meeting always being canceled. And then we just took it right out of the bylaw. So in that respect, you could also look at, if you want to go back to having a meeting in August, if you're going to allow for participation for members who are actually at AMO. Just going to throw that out there.
Notwithstanding your comments must be accepted. There are other important events also, like very important Ontario Good Roads and Roma, all of those others. So I don't know whether you want to name them, just members appointed to external boards, because that might include the Conservation Authority. And so I think by putting in that proviso that members appointed to an external advisory board, it should end there, not necessarily name them.
Yeah, just with respect to AMO, I mean, you're going there to participate in meetings, and if the warden has to be in a meeting with the Minister of Transportation at the time, it's not going to happen. So making it boards and committees makes sense rather than being specific to AMO.
Yeah.
Boards, committees, or events.
And do you want the portion left in there? Should they be performing this role in Canada?
I think if you're doing a planned vacation, you could, that's what we have alternates for. I really think that's where the alternate role comes in.
Should have, Bill.
Well, that idea of appointing an alternate if you can't attend the meeting, I don't necessarily see the value in that, other than just simply being a conduit of what happened on the meeting back to the individual that should be here. Because I don't know how much preparation someone can have if you're asked to attend a county council meeting, when there's ongoing discussions for months and months and months on issues that might come to head right at the meeting that individual is not at. So I'm torn between the ability to appoint someone to replace you during the meeting as to what positive things would come out of that.
Well, personal experience, I was away moose hunting this fall in October. our alternate came to the meeting. And then he came back and reported back to, next meeting, I was at township council. And quite often that second person has a different view. Mayor, who was here? You get a different perspective. I think it's important to have that representation here.
It also ensures that each township has fair and equal representation at the meeting. If, you know, for example, there's a contentious issue on the agenda that, for example, North Frontenac or South Frontenac is adamantly against, it ensures that you have fair representation and that you're not losing one of those votes.
I can live with it. I'm not expressing opinion that the procedure bylaw should do away with that appointee. Don't get me wrong, I'm not talking for that, so.
I'm comfortable if the option is there. Again, to your point, Bill, I think it's, there may be limited value in having an alternate just show up for a meeting without the background for many of the discussions that take place. We've never considered it at South Frontenac to have an alternate. We've never appointed somebody who would be a third person to participate in the event of absence of one of our two members. I like the idea of having one of our summer months without a meeting. In a perfect world, if the stars align, there's an opportunity for members of council to have a summer vacation with family. If there's a month where it's not fully packed with agenda items. So I'm comfortable with leaving the August meeting, leaving that open unless there are reasons that staff feels important, but we always have the opportunity to call an emergency meeting if there's an issue that comes up. So
And we have done that planning matters in the past. So there's nothing against time.
I don't think electronic participation should mean that we have 2 meetings in August automatically, because it's been tradition we haven't had an August council meeting for some time. So I don't think that having electronic participation should mean we should go back to that because everybody can meet electronically. I'm not advocating for that at all.
So for the most part, then I'm kind of hearing a mix of the county of Renfrew and Hastings. So, I mean, we would need to put in there for certain in situations where we're in a declared emergency. That would still cover us for what we're facing today with the pandemic. I'm hearing again, due to a significant weather event, do we want to leave in across the entire county or within its local municipalities? So that gives both if the whole county is in a situation. A member is ill or injured, but I would probably recommend to add the words or other medical issues. Not looking at this council, obviously, but the next council could have a young woman who's on parental leave. So you want to make sure that she's able to call in as well. So that could cover, I would think, medical issues. Is that a good term, do you think?
no,
No?
I don't think that, I don't consider parental leave a medical.
So what is there a term that you would want to use to accommodate for, I mean, one of the things that we had noted when we first looked at this was medical absences, parental leave, weather conditions. So is there something else or just leave it at ill or injured?
I'm happy to have parental leave if that's a possibility. That could affect male or women, or
Yeah.
paternity leave or a maternity leave. And I think that's very appropriate that we do incorporate that in.
Yeah, I think parental leave is a good term because you could have a child in the morning, you're a single parent, counselor gets up in the morning, they're sick, and you just can't. You don't have daycare for them, they're whatever. It would allow you to participate.
Okay. And then I'm also hearing a member has been duly appointed to an external advisory committee or event. has been duly appointed to and attending an external advisory role, an external advisory committee role or event. Come up with some better wording, but that's what I'm hearing. You're hearing that you want, it's an advisory committee, not necessarily
The name,
to list AMO, Roma, FCM.
Participating rather than attending.
Yep.
Slight difference. Group wordsmithing is always.
And then I'm also hearing, should they be performing this role in Canada? Is that correct?
I think that's fair.
And then-
When you come to that weather, I would just, I wouldn't say anything about geography at all. Significant weather event ended there.
So just looking at a couple of years ago when the city of Toronto has light snowfall and called the army and how do we want to define a significant weather event?
Well, that was significant for them.
Significance in the eye.
But, I mean, weather, we could have a whole book full of events, weather events that would fill up pages and pages, but I just think if we indicate that there is a possibility we could have weather. I don't know.
My son lives in Abbotsford, he knows all about weather.
I think the overriding sense is that members are expected to attend and be here. And we have to leave it to your judgment. If you feel it's unsafe to travel, or then we have to respect that. That the integrity of the members of council is to be here when they can.
You're not gonna risk your life to make the meeting.
I think you could emphasize the in-person part of this message. Italicizing that in the message, saying in-person is expected.
So I do have that, so we'll start it out with that one paragraph. There is an expectation that members of council make every effort to attend meetings in person. Electronic participation is available to members when, and then we can list we're under a declared emergency. 2, a significant weather event. 3, the member is ill or injured or on parental leave. 4, the member has been duly appointed to and participating in an external advisory role for a committee or event. I think that was it. And then we would have another paragraph after that, talking about electronic participation will not be allowed at an inaugural session of council or at meetings where the yearly budget is being considered unless municipalities in a declared emergency or where a vote of the majority of council requires it. And then we're going to add the definition of inaugural session. So there's just one other point or story that we've done in our research here that I wanted, if you had any consideration for. Do you want to limit the number of times somebody can participate electronically?
I think to Jerry's point, if there are non-resident members of the lower tier municipality who live remotely from the municipality and might choose to, if they had the opportunity to participate electronically for all the meetings, other than the inaugural budget meetings, I don't think that's a positive thing for our council, to have that level of participation. So some restriction might be appropriate. The other thing I presume is that unless there's a wholesale change in your council, presumably the majority of members of council would make the member consideration for that position. Are they willing or able to attend meetings regularly as the second member of the team from the lower tier municipality? But I think maybe having some restriction in there might be appropriate.
You could say there is a restriction to maximum of 3 meetings, at which time your position will be reevaluated.
So that's similar to Halliburton, which says a member may participate electronically in meetings up to 3 times a year. A member of council may request permission from the warden and the clerk to participate. I would prefer the clerk be removed from there. I do not want to be the one responsible for giving permission. That should not be under my role. But a member of council may request permission from the warden to participate electronically in additional meetings as a result of extenuating circumstances.
As Jerry, from one of your counselors has been on extended medical leave. So it could be that you might, something physical might happen that it's going to take you 6 months or something to recuperate. But you can still participate from your computer, but you can't drive. So there may be extended circumstances that you may want to have a window to allow more participation, but the rule is it's 3 with extended circumstances.
Cap with the gap.
Pardon?
Cap with the gap.
That's a good point, Bill, because he did participate yesterday in the personnel meeting, and it's first time in about 8 months that he did participate electronically yesterday.
So is 3 the right number, or should it be 2? 4?
2 would essentially be 20% of the total meetings, and year 3 would be 3 of 11. Is that reasonable that you would miss 30% here? Miss is the wrong word. I'm not using my- Yeah, to your point. That's,
I think 3 is a lot.
So one of the things that I didn't think to ask when I reached out to the other upper tiers was how many meetings a month you hold. Are you familiar with numbers?
Yeah,
People
and-
1 month or?
most are still at the 2 a month with the committee of the whole and then the council, but we did away with that almost 8 years ago now. And did the committee of the whole and the council meeting to avoid the travel. So most are still at 3. LNA is still at 3, Leeds and Granville is still at 3. 2, pardon me, sorry. Yeah, 2 per month.
So that could explain why they permit a member up to 3 times, because they do have more meetings. So again, you're going through the winter months. Where there could be, of course, significant, well, yeah, you're going through the winter months, so.
I would suggest as the chair is that we go to 2, given the number of meetings, and let it, we're going to present this to county, so let's hear what they have to say in regard to that. If all the members feel that that's too little or too many, then we evaluate.
I'm comfortable with 2. It seems to be consensus maybe to move to 2.
And we're all okay with it just being the warden who gives the override here. It should not be left to staff. So are we okay with removing and the clerk?
Oh, absolutely. I personally don't think that onus should fall on anybody here. Yeah. Because they may have a vendetta. They may have a vendetta. What?
No, we love everybody. Even you.
All right.
So then the next piece that we would need to look at is notice requirements. So if somebody opts to call in to participate electronically, what type of notice requirements do you want to place on them? There was some that was 48 hours. Some just say advance notice, but really that would mean that somebody could call in 1 minute before the meeting, and there's just absolutely no way we can scramble in 1 minute. I wouldn't even get the notice in 1 minute. So I'm at a loss as to, I'm going to ask maybe Ms. Cardinal here to pipe in on how long, when somebody calls in, it's the Zoom, if we're in regular times where we haven't got the Zoom up and going, we are able to live stream that out directly to YouTube. So we wouldn't actually have set up a Zoom meeting. So if somebody calls in outside of a pandemic, what do we need to do? I'm going to just maybe ask Angelique to answer that, what we need to do, how we need to set that meeting up, and how much notice we, at minimum, would need.
Well, providing that we've got staff available to set up all the Zoom and all the things in the background. I mean, it doesn't take that long to set it up, but you know, I'd say a couple of hours would probably be reasonable.
So I'm thinking if we give the example of a flat tire, or my car won't start because it's lights failed the outside, whatever, it could be very short notice that the member at least is saying, I can't get there, can I participate electronically?
Yeah, it's just a matter of the staff person going in and adding them and making sure that everything, all of the electronic stuff is up and running, working properly, and then we should be good to go.
Yeah, and Alan and Ron are the two closest. Everybody else, you're gonna know you've got a flat tire. Bill's gonna know an hour and a half before the meeting. So I think we could probably say 48 hours or at the earliest opportunity. And it would still be an hour and a half. If the meeting starts at 9, we're not here till 7:30.
Yeah, who you gonna let know anyway?
The clerk.
Yeah.
The warden and clerk.
Yeah, I would put it as expectation of 48 hours notice, but with the exception being in the case of a last minute emergency, as soon as you notify as soon as possible. But how early in the morning could I phone you, Jeanette, and say I'm not coming?
Send an email.
Phone call probably wouldn't be received until I actually get to the office. Email, I have email on my phone, I'm constantly checking it. So I would know if you emailed me at 6 o'clock in the morning, I would know at 6 o'clock in the morning because I check my email as soon as I get up.
Okay, but then what action are you able to perform that would, you know, support my fact that I'm not going to be there?
So most staff arrive at the building at 8 o'clock. So we could have that set up by 9, could we not?
Some arrive at 8:30.
No, but
So
we do have,
It depends on,
at some point, so our admin clerk who sits at the front desk usually is responsible for this Zoom setup. Angelique's been great to fill that role while we've been absent of that person, but that person is in the office at 8 o'clock. So if we knew at 8 o'clock, it's 5 minutes to set the Zoom up to get the links going. And from an IT perspective, I don't really know what happens down here in terms of connecting the camera to the computer, but I would think 8 o'clock
15 minutes. 15
would be
minutes.
sufficient. It would be possible. Are we scrambling? Yes. For those last minute emergencies, it's possible.
And I don't know how to say this politely, but if you let somebody know it's 8:45, you may miss the first 25 minutes of the meeting.
That's reasonable.
But the other thing is, I think we've also started to become complacent that technology will fix anything we deal with. I mean, if you had a flat tire 4 years ago, you weren't going to get to the meeting. Later, or your car wouldn't start, you weren't going to get to the meeting. That's the end of the story. And the fact that we can save you by participating electronically now means there's a scramble and that other people have to do. Oh, sometimes we're sick overnight and you couldn't attend. That's unfortunate, but
So the verbiage being is that 48 hours notice is expected, but in the event of an emergency, as soon as possible.
I like that.
Yeah, then I get up in the morning in the winter, like last winter. I get up at 5 o'clock, I look at that road, I'm a kilometer off the township road. I got some big hills to get from the lake out to the township road. I guess
You'd
like
be
that
okay when you
sometimes.
got to Central Front after be fine.
Yeah.
Well, as a counselor, I think they should be applying my rule anyway.
Yeah, you should be first.
Does it make sense to add to what Bill just said? And county staff will make reasonable efforts to accommodate. That's right. I'm just trying to get to some sort of reasonableness here. Angelique isn't just, or Jasmine isn't just waiting for that call. She's also setting up coffee.
Doing other things.
Aaron's also doing other things. It may be such that it isn't possible, or that you're 15 or 20 minutes late getting connected. Subject to reasonable.
I'm happy with that. I'm happy with that concept because I say we can't always be saved by technology.
Right. But on the other hand, you want to have it explained in a manner that people wouldn't be taking advantage of it either. Right, so that, oh, if I don't, you know what, I don't feel like doing it, I was doing electronically at the last moment, so I think there has to be an understanding you're expected to be here. By the way, the electronics have not saved the Toronto Maple Leafs, so that's when Stanley Cup.
Nothing to say.
So does this sound okay? So we could put 48 hours notice to the clerk to ensure proper technology is enabled to make electronic participation possible. But in the event of an emergency, as soon as possible, recognizing that due to constraints on staff, the member may be admitted late to the meeting. Is that? We can come up with some wording because.
We'll work on
Yeah, we'll work on the wording
Shorten that up.
because if you'll notice on the third item here, which is really just for information, not up for discussion, but it lets you know all of the changes that you've made to date. So that will be updated each meeting. So we'll update that. We'll get the proper wording in there for you. And then when we come to the next meeting, you can,
Okay.
review that change. Say, well, I'm not quite sure I like that word.
Sounds fine.
So in terms of type of electronic participation, so at this point, we do use Zoom or teleconference, which is the video or audio teleconference. That's what we use here at the county, and I'm not sure of any other technologies out there. We have spoken with IT. We are moving to Microsoft Teams, but it's not the appropriate technology to do this type of meeting. So we'll continue through the video or teleconference. That's
Well, would you add phone? That was.
That's teleconference.
Okay. Yeah. Because certainly we've had occasions where even the mayor had to conduct a meeting by phone because it works as it is.
I don't like Microsoft Teams. I don't find it's consistently reliable. I've never had a problem with Zoom, but Microsoft Teams is, I've often had problems with the Conservation Authority uses it. I've had tire changing language used to try to deal with it.
What's WebEx? What's that?
It's just another platform. The library used to use that.
That was wasn't very good that I remember.
I don't have IT here with me, but I do believe that those platforms do not allow you to
Stream to YouTube.
stream to YouTube. They do not allow, it had to do something as well with the public to streaming to YouTube and then the public participation piece. Like you couldn't leave people in a waiting room. Was that? one?
Yeah, it was-
But there was some
Zoom has
issues
waiting
around
room.
it. So for what we actually use it for, it's not an idea. You can't use it for the platform in which we hold our meetings.
Zoom has always worked for me. Zoom always works.
Yeah, even North Frontenac Zoom works.
Well, I'm strongly in favor of keeping Zoom as being the
It's working by change.
that platform.
You were probably going to go where I was going, and that is in the event of a loss of communication. So we have to put statements in there.
So there's two aspects to loss of connectivity. The first one is when we absolutely have to have it. So for example, right now, where we're under a pandemic, where the public are not allowed into the building, and their only way of seeing us is through that YouTube live stream. As the ombudsman has found, if we lose that connectivity, we've now gone into a closed meeting. So we actually have to stop the meeting at that point and try to get us back up to speed. So the question around in an emergency or when the public's not in the building, there's a couple of things that I kind of want council to look at, and that is how long are we down before you call the meeting? 15 minutes, half an hour? Like if we can't get that live stream up in half an hour, do we recess the meeting and it's rescheduled to another day? So the question is, how long do you want to leave it? 15 minutes, half an hour, an hour? I just need a time frame for that.
I guess my question is, what's caused the loss of connectivity? And as I totally out of my realm in trying to evaluate or discuss that. But if our tech folks are saying it's this, it'll take 10 minutes or it'll take 20 minutes, then I'm happy to let it happen. If we don't know, everything's gone down, then maybe that's the point where we need to be rigid with the 15 minutes. Say, okay, we've waited the 15 minutes, nothing's gonna happen. Let's recess the
I think in the past, I think 15 minutes is always, we've always been up in less than 15 minutes. And like Ron Higgins is, he's often loses connection because of poor connection, I guess, but he's always back up in 5 minutes or.
But I think the separator, Bruce, I think we're looking at what happens if we lose our connectivity with the public.
Oh,
Then we get into the issues of individual connectivity, but I think 15 minutes may be appropriate, but if our tech support says give me another few minutes, we can make it work. I'm suggesting we might want to do that rather than reconvene a meeting later, just with that brief moment.
Yeah, my position is that given the geography we're dealing with, from North Frontenac down here, and we've driven, we drive probably an hour and 10 minutes to get here, now 15 minutes. So if we're going to cancel a meeting in 15 minutes and then discover that we all have to come back a day or so later to resume that meeting, I think given our geography, we should expand that horizon a little bit, say half hour. I would rather stay here an extra half hour than actually waste another day. Not waste, don't ever say that coming here, I feel like waste productive time. That I would rather, use an extra half hour on this day and not have to come back again.
So I agree entirely.
I agree too. Bill, it takes me probably an hour and 25 minutes to get here.
I was also going to comment that when we met with our IT staff, they said the big thing would be like, for example, if this main laptop went down, then we lose everything. For example, we had an issue with the owl, then it wouldn't be picking up sound. So it's a matter of also them being available to go find new equipment and replace that equipment. So I'm thinking we're saying 30 minutes is reasonable at least, because we would have to make sure we've got the staff, we have to make sure that we find the extra equipment. So there's all those factors as well.
Again, although we talk about the half an hour, I think to Bill's point, if another 5 minutes will get us back up and running, I think most members of council would rather wait that little bit of time and be able to resume the meeting. I'm not sure what that's public participation, but I think most members would rather wait a little bit longer and put in the extra time to see if we can get reconnected again. So even if we make a particular time limit, whether it's 15 minutes or half an hour, reality is I think members can determine based on the advice we receive at that time, whether they wish to, by 2/3 majority vote, extend that time or waive the procedural bylaw to allow us that extra time to keep the meeting running.
So I'm thinking what we could perhaps put is that if the live stream goes down, that council recess the meeting, which we would have to do. And then we could put, if after 30 minutes, the live stream is still not back up, the warden in consultation with, and I'm saying staff here because he'd want to talk to IT staff, the warden in consultation with, well, I'm going to put CAO. but it would be with consultation with staff, may recess the meeting to another time. Does that work, do you think?
I think it works for us. I'm not sure it works for the public. So let's assume that you're sitting at home at Jerry's house as John Q. Public. You're gonna want to know that if it goes down, that you're gonna be back up in 30 minutes or the meeting is off.
Yeah.
If I come back at 32 minutes and the warden has made a decision in this room that I'm not privy to, I may sit there for another 2 hours.
Yeah. That's true. The other option that we could look at as well, and this goes back to the electronic meetings. We could opt that would fall under, for example, so one of the electronic meeting provisions that the committee looked at under SD&G, which we will add, is as determined by the warden in consultation with the CAO and clerk, that an electronic meeting of the full council is necessary or an efficient means of the completion of county business. So we could put in here, should the live stream go down, the meeting will reconvene within 24, 48 hours via electronic participation. That's just an option I can throw out that you may want to consider. I'm just going to throw, or with the potential full electronic participation. I'm just throwing options out there when you know the point.
The electronic meeting, if the meeting goes down, there has to be some consideration that perhaps some of the members of council will be joining electronically also. And that a quorum would have to be, before the meeting could go on, we would have to ensure that we have verbiage in there saying that quorum must be present either electronically or in person before the meeting can continue. Let's say that we have 6 members of our county council are joining the meeting electronically. The meeting's going on, then everything fails. You say, well, it'll resume in 30 minutes if we can. I think we have to say something that maybe for various reasons, rather than having 6 county councilors come back on, maybe only 2 of them were able to come back on. So do you say something in there about ensuring that the meeting will continue, proviso that we have a quorum in 30 minutes?
So I think back to the CAO's point, we need to put a specific time frame in there of when we call the meeting quits for public transparency.
Yes.
So if it's called quits after 30 minutes, then the warden will then, after calling it quits, call what we've called a special meeting to continue business that was not completed at a future date.
That all members of council could participate electronically.
And at that meeting, because now you've put in a procedural bylaw that you can only attend electronically under certain criteria. So we could put in here that if the meeting is recessed for the day because of loss of connectivity, the warden will call a special meeting within 48 hours in which members may participate electronically if they choose.
So you don't have to
I mean, we
drive
can
down.
come up
Okay.
with verbiage, but I'm trying to
Yeah. I
address the
understand.
situation of what you're saying, of where some members have traveled for 2 hours for a meeting. and
Well,
then-
that fixes a geography problem. It does.
And I haven't read the ombudsman's report in a couple of months, but once it goes down, I think the only motion that can reasonably be passed is a motion to adjourn.
So you don't actually need a motion to recess, so the meeting would just be recessed.
Yeah, but after that, the only motion you
Yeah.
could possibly
Yes.
pass would be a motion to adjourn. So you can't even pass a motion to postpone it. So the procedural bylaw would have to provide some accommodation to make that happen. There are special meeting provisions within within the bylaw, but maybe using your wording, I think covers it.
Good idea. Get a coffee.
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure, Kelly, I understand what your point was. Can you elaborate a little bit about it?
Well, the ombudsman has determined that it is a closed meeting as soon as you lose connectivity.
Yes.
So if you can't get connectivity back within your specified time, 30 minutes or a half hour, you can't pass another motion to do something else because it's a closed session. The only motion you could possibly pass after your internet connectivity goes down and your timeline passes is a motion to adjourn. You couldn't pass a motion to reconvene tomorrow at 2:30 because you're doing that in closed session. You'd have to rely on the provisions of the procedural bylaw for a special meeting.
And one of the other issues that was noted in here that I'm still actually checking with the city of Ottawa in terms of the legality of motions that have been passed before we lost connectivity. So let's say you lose connectivity right at the reading of the bylaws. What happens with all of those previous motions that were passed? Because until the confirmatory bylaw is passed, it doesn't confirm anything. So I'm trying to find out because they have a lot of legal expertise in the department of what happens with motions that have been passed before we lose connectivity. Are we able to act on them? Or are we not able to act on them because there's been no confirmatory bylaw? Or do we have the option to pass a confirmatory bylaw up to what has been? I'm still working with them to see what happens with those motions that have been.
Well, when we lose connectivity, we're recessing, we're not canceling.
Correct.
So that means we carry on at the next available time. Right?
So the wording could be that after the pick a time, 15 minutes or 30 minutes, the meeting will be postponed
Exactly.
until a time determined by the warden in accordance with special meeting provisions of the procedural bylaw.
And then the meeting carries on.
And then, yes, so you couldn't act on something that happened in the first hour because there is no confirmatory bylaw, the meeting hasn't ended. But you could use the provisions of the procedural bylaw to call a special meeting to finish it.
The agenda for your special meeting would simply be the completion of the agenda that you were already into when you were interrupted. In which case, at the end of that agenda, you're going to pass the confirming bylaw. And then carry on with whatever else.
Yeah.
You might have an agenda.
Anyway, we're gonna take a brief break right now for coffee.
Great.
Good. Other matters.
Great idea.
Great.
Oh, there, right.
So if I can just read kind of what I've heard here then. I think we can put a provision in, should connectivity be lost during a meeting where the public is unable to attend in person and connectivity cannot be reestablished within 30 minutes, the meeting will be recessed and the warden will call a special meeting within 48 hours to reconvene the meeting. Now, do you want me to add to that with members of council having the option to participate electronically, or do we want to still follow, you have to drive here? I just didn't know if you wanted that provision in there. If a special meeting's called, say the meeting's the next day, do you want the option to go outside of the electronic criteria here and say at which point? So council will have the option to participate either in person or electronically without it being counted one of its two. I mean, I can come up with some better wording, but do you want
I know
that
where you're-
provision in there?
I understand what you're saying is that we've got, you're basically what you're saying is you want those 2 special days to be an emergency rather than using them up on special call meetings.
I think that's reasonable. I suppose it depends if the ward is calling the meeting to order and we use connectivity at that point, it can't be reestablished, then the full meeting is going to be happening electronically. On the other hand, if it's reading the confirmatory bylaw, the meeting tanks, then to ask members to drive in for 30 seconds doesn't make any sense at all.
Could we leave that at the call of the warden?
That's fine. Something like that would be
I
reasonable.
suspect as we're walking out, there'd be a discussion. But, at the call of the warden, electronic option may be available for all councilors. If you're 2 minutes into the meeting, it might not make sense. If all you have left is the confirmatory bylaw, does it make sense for Bill to come, I don't know, 20 minutes down here to pass?
Yeah, I don't know, shot.
Chair might want you to go shop.
Just from point of interest, how does Fourth the Lakes get away with their verbiage? First page of the municipality there.
They didn't put any restrictions on it.
I'm going to, and it is an assumption, assume that that is not when the public, they could be fully open to the public now.
That's the
They
point I
could
was
be
getting
allowing
to,
the
yeah.
public in the building. So there's a difference, there's a difference between connectivity and linking when you restrict the public from coming into the room or when they are allowed in the room. So I think, as I noted in the report, when the public is allowed back in the room and we're back to normal, the live stream is an added perk, an added bonus. It's not mandatory. It then becomes complimentary. Once the public is allowed back in the room, we're no longer closed to the public. So when we live stream it, that's just complimentary to what we do. So I'm going to guess that they have this in their bylaw right now because they're now fully back open to the public, or that may be just for when a councillor himself.
Well, that's what appeared to me, was it? They were only considering that the people participating were the council members themselves,
Yeah,
not considering the public. But anyway, it's immaterial, but that's fine. Let's go with what we're trying to achieve. I don't worry about them.
so then we're just going to add another sentence at the call of the warden, electronic participation may be available to all members of at the special meeting.
Were we putting in a time frame? Did I hear the warden will call a meeting within 48 hours? Did I hear that or not?
I did put that in there if that works for everybody. And the reason I say that is because we do only meet once a month. And sometimes there are time sensitive or could be times, you know, staff's hands are tied until council actually authorizes staff to carry out certain things that are in those reports, so. Does that work for everybody?
Well, I know for anybody, including myself, who's fairly busy personal schedule, to be able to, like my calendar is full, so by putting a time frame in there, it may be that there are counselors that wouldn't be able to attend within 48 hours because of other conflicts. So I'm wondering if it would be better to, rather than putting a time frame in it, the statement as soon as possible. In which case, head count can be made of the people who could attend, say, rather than Tuesday morning, if we met on Tuesday or Wednesday, and if the special meeting was going to be the next day, and half the people were going to have a conflict, would it not be better to do a head count and say, could we meet then on Friday morning or something, as soon as possible?
And
Under the circumstances.
as soon as possible also leaves open the opportunity for the potential that, you know, it's a regional wide outage. I think back to the ice storm.
Yeah.
It wasn't even possible.
No,
If you leave it at 48 hours, then you have to have it. If you leave it as a reasonable or as soon as possible, then it gives flexibility.
How do we notify the public though? That I mean, if the bylaw says within 48 hours, mind you, they don't know whether we're gonna reconvene at 7 in the morning on the Friday or 3 o'clock. in the afternoon on Friday. So we have to be able to have somebody to notify them, I presume.
So we put up a notice of special council meeting onto our website. So each time a special meeting is called, I mean, we've called special meetings in the past. So notice of special meeting goes up onto the website. And then once we know the date of the meeting, I can immediately link the agenda so that it pops up on the calendar on my calendar as well.
I'm happy with the leaving some more flexibility. If we're going to be able to notify, if we can do it within 48 hours, or there's quorum in 48 hours, then maybe we want to do it then. If there's a quorum on the Monday, maybe it becomes Monday, but
Or about within 48 hours or as soon as reasonably possible. Just if you put 48 hours, then you're stuck with 48 hours. Yeah, and it may not work for everybody.
maybe a quorum or the emergency that caused the outage may have been resolved.
Wouldn't you send out a notice, maybe suggesting more than one time, like 48 hours from now, or like maybe Wednesday or Thursday, and then we could get back to you and let you know?
That's the process. Like, yes, we do send out a notice. I would say, you know, this is the time that the warden's called. Please let me know if you're available. But we're talking in terms of the actual procedural follow-up. What is the time frame that you want?
if the way I look at it is, if we lose continuity, we're all, in many respects, we're going to be here. And what we're trying to address is the fact that the public want to join the meeting also. So we might know here, we might all be here, and for some reason we've lost it. So we probably know what can everybody reattend in 48 hours, or so I don't know that it'd be a big deal trying to get a quorum.
I think it goes back to what Kelly said, excuse me. I think it goes back to what Kelly said, that there's gonna be a conversation when we go to leave here.
Yeah.
You know, and that's when the decision will probably be made. But that's the reasonable way to do it. Don't agree with the hard and fast 48 hour. That's right.
Put it down at that, see what the rest of the heads of the group consider when it comes back to the table.
One thing is Kelly pointed out, maybe it should be within 48 hours or as soon as practical.
Yeah.
Something language like that.
It's gotta be flexible. Yeah, just has to be.
certainly gives you flexibility.
So are you okay then with, we'll call a special meeting within 48 hours or as soon as reasonably possible to reconvene the meeting at which members may participate electronically at the call, sorry. Special meeting within 48 hours or as soon as reasonably possible, period. At the call of the warden, electronic participation may be available to all members at the special meeting. Is that
I think there's consensus for that.
that's when the public's not able to attend. So now let's look
Bruce's
at,
point. To Bruce's point about individual members.
yes, so now we come to a point where if individual members are participating electronically, and there could be a number of issues that happen. So for example, they lose connectivity, they get kicked out, or they're not able to connect, or for whatever reason, they're not able to. Do you want to address that? So just looking at some of them, we have here the County of Renfrew. It said in the event of an interruption in connectivity for a member that is participating electronically, the meeting will resume without the participant and their absence will be noted in the minutes. A member shall inform the presiding officer and the clerk should they turn off their video, be continued to be present, otherwise they will be identified as absent. So that's an interesting fact that they have there. So I'm not sure if it would work for us, because I know that in North Frontenac, the connectivity is quite poor, that you actually can't have your video on when you're participating. So, but in terms of their procedure there, if you lose connectivity, we just proceed without you. There was another one with Hastings. If connection is lost or fails during a meeting, there will not be an attempt made to reconnect until the matter under consideration is complete. The clerk will note in the minutes that the participant left the meeting at the time the connection was lost, and should a member's connection fail for a second time, the member will be deemed to have left the meeting for its entirety. So Hastings there is if a member loses connectivity, we continue on until we finish discussing whatever matter is on the table. Then at that point, the warden or deputy warden would say, we're going to call a quick recess to allow Councillor Martin to get reconnected.
To Kelly's point, though, also is that if that loss of connectivity has thing on quorum, we have to be aware of that as well. So if we lose Jerry and Jerry was the member that provided quorum, then we have to ensure that we can get Jerry back on, or we have to recess the meeting.
So under Northumberland, it says in the case of an interruption in the communication link to the members participating electronically, council will recess to a maximum of 15 minutes until it is deemed whether the link can be reestablished. If communications are not reestablished, the meeting will resume without the electronic participants, provided there is quorum.
Right. Yeah. Now, to that, are we, instead of using 15 minutes, are we going to use 30 minutes?
I don't know, because I mean, what if there is quorum? Are you still going to take 30 minutes to reconnect that member?
I don't think we should.
No, but I think that statement was in the event of losing a quorum.
So maybe perhaps we could work on this one and then add another paragraph to it in the event that the electronic participant was required for quorum. So something along that line, in the event the participant was required for quorum. Council will recess for a maximum of 30 minutes.
Yeah.
think 30 minutes is reasonable.
Given the geography we're dealing with. You see, now we're only talking about members here. Not the public. We're talking about the members who are joining us electronically here. So you might lose one or two and still have a quorum. So you have to have the ability to continue the meeting. Because you do have a quorum.
So if we lose quorum, so we have in the event that the electronic participant was required for quorum, council will recess for a maximum 30 minutes, at which point, what?
Meeting will recess.
No, the meeting will be canceled or postponed,
Adjourn or
adjourned or whatever.
See, at this point, the warden has some leeway to make alternate arrangements because it's just the member that's now disconnected. The public is still in full view of this meeting and they're still able to see it. So at this point, the warden has a little bit more discretion. Keep that in mind.
But for quorum, how do we phone Gary, say, just get on the phone, Gary, rather than. How do we handle, how do we ensure we maintain a quorum?
So you go back to your landline, you're saying, and does that constitute the point?
It would. Would it not?
You might have to go into the phone booth with the.
Yeah.
Superman.
So I think there are a couple of, for me, there are a couple of issues. If the issue becomes quorum, then I think, to Bill's point, I think it's worth investing a little more time if we can reestablish it to maintain the meeting time. If Jerry's one of eight who's loses connectivity, and everyone else is there, then give Jerry 10 minutes. Some other number possibly, but I mean,
Jeanette, have you ever investigated what, for example, the school boards do in this situation? Because there are some school boards that are gigantic. Like people drive all day to a meeting. Where you get up to Nipissing, East and West, where they hold the meetings in North Bay, and somebody's from Perry Sound is a school board. Do we have any information in regard to how they conduct electronic meetings?
So I'm going to maybe look to Kelly just for a second here, because I'm not sure the school board does not fall under the municipal act.
No,
So
but they
I,
probably got good practices and procedures.
yeah, so I don't know what their requirements are. Are they required to be open to the public? Oh, they are, okay. Then I'm not sure what they do.
The reason I asked the question, just because of the huge expanse of geography that some of those school boards are dealing with, that wondering if, I think what we're trying to achieve here is actually going to accommodate, and I think it will, half hour could be lots of time for us to accommodate.
You can't do it in half an hour, you're not gonna do it.
I'm just making the distinction between needing it for quorum and doing it to ensure the member is able to participate if possible. There's, I think there are two distinctions there.
Yes.
Yeah. If the quorum is not at play, then I think it's important we try to establish contact with the member. But if that's not readily available, or we know there's an extended period, then
Just carry on.
carry on.
Right.
But if it's a quorum issue, then 30 minutes.
So actually, now that we're talking about quorum, the sheets that I had passed out, we haven't gotten to this point yet, because right now we're just looking at electronic participation, but thinking ahead, if I thought if the meeting on electronic participation ended a little bit sooner, the committee might want to go through some additional things. So the next piece of the procedural bylaw is quorum. So we have addressed, or I have looked at ways to address quorum. If we look at that sheet, 10.3 is loss of quorum during the meeting. So we're suggesting adding 2 points here to change from if quorum is lost during a meeting, then the meeting shall stand adjourned and all unfinished business shall be carried forward to the next meeting. And we're suggesting changing it to 2 aspects. If quorum is lost during a meeting, the chair shall recess for a period of 15 minutes or until quorum is present, whichever is sooner. And if there is no quorum after 15 minutes, the meeting shall stand adjourned and all unfinished business shall be carried forward to the next regular meeting unless special meeting is called. So that being said, for the purposes of putting criteria around electronic participation, we're likely okay to leave it at the meeting will resume without the electronic participant providing there is quorum. If there's no quorum, then we're going to refer to section 10.3 of the bylaw of how we address quorum in any meeting, whether it's electronic participation or whether a member of council all of a sudden gets a phone call to come home because my wife's having a baby. Who knows? But it could be. But it could be, it's not, I hate to address it here under electronic participation when it could happen, whether you're electronic or in person. So I would suggest at this point to just leave it at without the part electronic participants, providing there is quorum. And then if quorum's lost, we deal with it under the next section.
Yeah. I just want you to know that if I get that phone call, I'm not going home.
It won't be from the wife.
Just the only thing I could think of, but there are times when, you know, a counselor may have to walk out of the meeting.
No,
when
absolutely.
quorum's
Yeah,
lost.
or, you know, people could, during the meeting, have a heart attack or whatever during the meeting, so you're gonna have to
In
reset.
budget times, it's
Yeah, if I got that phone call, I certainly would be in case for the next day.
Yeah, things are not.
I like the verbiage on that loss of quorum during the meeting. The only thing I would change is the 15 to 30.
Okay, but so sorry, but for addressing the loss of live stream or connectivity for a member, then are we looking to look at Northumberland's in the case of an interruption in the communication link? Council recess a maximum of 15 minutes or until the link is reestablished. If not reestablished, then we resume onwards. Or do you want a combination of that one and the municipality that said if the loss of life, if they lose connectivity, council will finish the item that they're on and then recess to get the connectivity back up?
or don't require reconnectivity if it isn't a loss of quorum. Carry on.
Yeah. That's essentially what they're doing. Ron Higgins lost his connectivity. We just keep on going.
So perhaps in Zoom, that's a little easier to address because the person running the Zoom is in the room at the back. But let's just think back to one meeting we had where Councillor Ron Higgins called in. And he kept losing, we kept losing him, and you kept stopping the meeting to get him back on. So there's that option as well. So it could be telephone, it just, and if it's teleconference, because the phone is right in the middle of the room, you're either gonna have to make the decision to recess for 5 minutes to see if you can get back up, or if he loses the telephone line, that's it, you're going. There's no in between for this
Yeah.
one.
Between you and I, we're not going to be able to cover every issue or every circumstance that might appear to us. So basically, we have to leave it in a situation where if something happens during the meeting, the warden or the chair or whatever it is going to say, well, okay, let's take a 15-minute break and see if we can correct this before we make a final decision. But I don't think we can cover every scenario possible. We just have to get the schematics there and then apply it whatever we need.
And again, it's relative to where you are in the meeting. If it's all we're doing is we're at the very end and it's adjournment, might be one decision. If we're about to debate passage of a new official plan for the county of Frontenac, you may want to take a 15-minute break to give that person.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Does that make sense, John?
It does, but how do you want to address that in the bylaw? I mean, I
It's at the
think-
call of the ward.
Oh, at the call of the warden. So in the event that the electronic okay. So what we're going to do is we just continue on at the call of the warden. So if connection is lost or fails during that meeting, there will not any attempt to be any attempt
and
to be
attempt
made
to reconnect.
to reconnect will be at the call of the warden.
To continue the meeting will be called.
Sorry, we're just, you can continue on.
I guess what I'm saying is that if we're almost done, the warden can say, well, we're going to continue. If we're about to consider the official plan of the county of Frontenac, and it's the most important business that's ever happened, he may want the option to call an adjournment for 15 minutes.
So if connection for a member is lost or fails during a meeting,
And quorum is not an issue.
and quorum, no issue.
And the quorum is maintained. The meeting shall continue
In perpetuity.
absolutely, or until we run out of snacks.
So the meeting shall continue without the member. Or at the call of the warden, is that what you're suggesting?
The warden can always call a 15-minute adjournment. I mean, at the pleasure of the group can override the chair, but I'm just trying to say that there might be instances where you just keep on going, and there might be other instances where the warden might want to call for a 15-minute recess.
So I'm not going to say that this has ever happened, but there is the potential that it could. If you have a warden that specifically does not like a member of council and that councillor loses connectivity, he may say, well, we're just going to keep going.
At point of privilege, we're going to vote. The rest of the group can always override the chair.
If
Kept in
they're comfortable
circumstances,
with that.
You, generally speaking, I would, if I was chairing meeting or the board, I would always want the member, I would say, well, would the members agree with a 15-minute break? Right, so you try to get the involved, but you know, you're absolutely right. If there are occasions where the chairs maybe got the motorcycle going and they don't want to stop, so.
Well, I'm more concerned with if you end up at some point with a warden who may show favoritism.
But the group can always override the warden.
Yeah.
The chair.
I think Bill's point is it's going to be extremely difficult to cover every eventuality. And we'll have to deal with some things on an ad hoc basis, I think, with the majority vote of council. If we choose to carry on against the warden's wishes or extend the break for another 5 minutes to do something, that I think we have to have some flexibility.
I really and truly don't, like, I mean, when the warden calls a break, I've never heard anybody say, well, it might say, well, take a 5-minute break because, you know, otherwise we're gonna have puddles on the floor or something. But nobody's timing it. So a 30-minute break for to repair some electronic breakdown may seem like 2 hours. It's only 30 minutes, but I think the chair has a certain amount of, let's say, okay, let's come back, you know, let's spend, or we say we're going to 30-minute break and somebody goes shopping, that's a different story. But 30-minute break and 10 minutes or 15 minutes later, everything's up and running. We're not going to use 30 minutes. We're going to go back on 3 months. It's only if you're letting the public know that we'll be back in 30 minutes. Pretty well have to keep to that because somebody could tune in early or late and miss something. So, but flexibility, in my opinion, is what we have to build into all of this.
So then what we're keeping is if connection for a member participating electronically is lost or fails during the meeting and quorum is maintained, no attempt will be, how am I wording that? The meeting shall continue without the member. That's how we're wording it. And then we'll just put, the clerk will note in the minutes that the participant left the meeting at the time that the connection was lost.
You might want to say a member. The member must attempt to reconnect, but failing that, the meeting will continue
That's what I'm
if
not.
we have a quorum.
Proviso was in this clause that if quorum is maintained, we are going to cancel the meeting in order to.
Right.
Remember to connect. It's up to the member if they wish to connect. They also may be reading the confirmatory bylaw. They may not care to try to reconnect.
Right. But they have to understand that if they're not reconnecting, the meeting's going to continue without them. That's really what we're saying.
Yes, so the bylaw will state if connection for a member participating electronically is lost or fails and quorum is maintained, the meeting shall continue without the member. The clerk will note in the minutes that the participant left the meeting at the time the connection was lost.
The member can rejoin if they're able to do so.
I don't think we need that in the
No,
procedure. bylaw, they can rejoin, but yes,
but
they
it's
can
an
rejoin.
expectation. The member can
Yeah.
connect.
And the warden can adjourn the meeting or call a recess for 15 minutes, depending on circumstance, but I don't think it needs to be stated there.
So we're almost out of time. So I think that covered everything that we needed for electronic participation. So we've addressed the criteria, we've addressed the notice requirements, we've addressed the type of participation restricting Zoom and teleconference, and we've addressed losing live stream when the public is not permitted to be in the room. And we've addressed losing connectivity for any members who lose it, providing that quorum isn't affected. So I will certainly get those worded up correctly, and they will be added to that options and consideration sheet that is part of item C, which is just going to be added to every agenda so that you can see what you've done to date. So if we still have just a little bit of time, I don't know if we'll have time really to address the quorum one, but I just wanted confirmation from the committee that I did add 2 new things at the beginning of that proposed amendment sheet. And the one was the change of the inaugural meeting. And then the one was also the change in the election of warden and deputy warden for the inaugural meeting. So as I noted earlier, Bill 68 changed the term of council when it begins after the next election. So previously it was December 1st. So your first meeting in December was always your inaugural. Now the meeting is November 15th, so your first meeting would need to be, your inaugural meeting would be in November, because the act does require that you do have to call a meeting within the first 30 days. So I think if it's November 15th, leaving it until December, the middle of December would not put us within those 30 days for potential snot. So we're recommending, because it is the 15th of the month, we want to make sure that the lower tiers have ample opportunity to call their inaugural meeting, as well as notify us of who their second member council will be. So we're recommending the last Wednesday of November, which basically gives the lower tiers a week and a half to get that information to me, so that when the agenda goes out, I'm able to notify the new members.
What's the date of the next municipal election?
October 22nd.
October 22nd.
I think.
And then the new council will take office November 15th. Or whenever your municipality has its inaugural meeting.
And it is for 2022, it is a 5 Wednesday.
It's what?
It's a 5 Wednesday one.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
So it
And
actually
to
be-
quote the CAO, it might not work out for the following election, but neither of us will be here, so. It should work out for subsequent ones as well, because it does give you a 2-week time frame.
That would be a positive statement, wasn't it?
But there are advantages to having acclamations. You know who you're working with. But a lot of people don't agree with acclamations. Claim that feel you should go meet public.
But for us, it's the appointment of the second member.
Yeah.
So there's going to be 3 municipalities where we won't know the second member until you hold your inaugural meeting.
Right.
Regardless of that.
Right. Just off top a little bit, I think that this next election is going to be quite interesting considering the new, let's say, requirements of, what's the term, if you exposing yourself to the public in regard to, pardon the pun, what the requirements to
Disclosure.
disclosure of family disclosures, because, for example, my son works for a construction company that may or may not bid on municipal contracts, either at the county or at the, as a disclosure. I don't know whether I'll be appointed to county council. I know I'm not running for mayor, so I know that's a problem, but I could be, I got reelected if I decide to run. I could get appointed back here, so their company bidding on contracts, or have to disclose that. So I think kind of onerous, but.
So Jeanette, are there any further things that you wish to cover in this document you provided to us now?
So the only
The rest of
other
this
thing,
meeting.
sorry, Chair, the only other thing that was added here was quorum. We could potentially try to get through it, but again, it's going to be a big discussion on timeframes, right? 15 minutes, 30 minutes. So I'll leave it up to the committee. Do they feel they have enough time to go through the section on quorum, or did you want to leave it until the next meeting?
Where are we starting? Section 10?
So, yes, so section 10, so the first piece is no quorum at the beginning of the meeting. So currently, the bylaw states that if current quorum is not present at a scheduled meeting 15 minutes before the meeting, then the meeting is adjourned. So I think we're recommending here, and I did check with a couple of other upper tier counties, I'm suggesting to change that to 30 minutes rather than 15. The
Change it
reason
to-
I say that is because we are quite a huge demographic. 15 is great if you're a lower tier or a single tier municipality where people are just running across town to get to a meeting, but here we've got quite a hike from one end of the county to another. So I did check with Lanark, as I noted, Lennox and Addington, as well as the city of Ottawa, which as well as the big city, but it's a very large land mass. And they do provide for 30 minutes. So I thought that council might want to look at that and change it to 30 minutes.
I would concur with that, Mr. Chair, at 30 minutes. It's no different than what we were discussing earlier when it comes to electronic participation.
I think that's reasonable. We quite likely we might hear from a member, the car's broken down, or whatever the circumstances are. I
Stuck at the train.
Well, yeah, I'm sitting here in Ditchburg, the tracks.
car just went
The ferry could be broken.
fair. Broken down.
Or even the missing of a ferry. If you miss that ferry, you're automatically 30 minutes, you're an hour behind schedule. aren't you?
For Wilton.
For the one-
But at the same time, presumably the member then might be able to contact somebody and say, I'm not gonna make it in 15 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever.
So, and then the next one deals with the loss of quorum. So I'm going to suggest to separate this. So currently it just states that if quorum is lost during a meeting, then the meeting shall stand adjourned and all unfinished business shall be carried forward to the next meeting. So there's two types of quorum that can be lost, right? So I'm suggesting to split this into two. So for example, if quorum is lost during a meeting, the chair shall call a recess for a period of 15 minutes or until quorum is present, whichever is sooner. And then the next one is if there is no quorum after 15 minutes, the meeting shall stand adjourned and all unfinished business shall be carried forward unless a special meeting is called. So the philosophy behind this was, and as I noted there, the current wording mandates that the quorum, if quorum's lost, automatically adjourned. Automatically. There could be a member that just steps out to go to the washroom because he couldn't hold it any longer. if that loses quorum,
Let the
do
minutes
you want
say.
to, but if that happened, we would automatically have lost quorum, and technically, under the procedural bylaw, you should have adjourned the meeting.
Yeah.
So there's two types, when quorum is lost for, a brief period. Or if quorum is lost,
I think they should be considered.
It's two
Kelly, from a
separate- It's two separate
perspective of-
issues.
If you're not present, the meeting cannot continue, am I correct?
Jeanette isn't present, I am a deputy clerk, but if both of us are not here, then we're done. One of the two of us has to be.
One of the two.
Correct.
So if the clerk is lost, if you're both lost, then the meeting is adjourned also.
Can't have it. So,
Because somebody has to record
correct.
the action. Does that have to be stated?
In the act.
It's in the
that's
act.
what
Okay,
it is.
all right.
Just a minor point of clarification, or it says adjourn and any unfinished business. If it's adjourned before the confirmatory bylaw, everything is unfinished. business. Just so everybody understands that.
So what that, it's not technically. Yeah. So this is what I'm trying to get clarification on, and I've reached out to the city of Ottawa because they do have a great deal of expertise there. So if, for example, we're halfway through a meeting and there's 10 recommend reports from the chief administrative officer, and we've already dealt with 5 of them, then when we adjourn the meeting, so I shouldn't, I wondered, Kelly, maybe this is another thought, does the meeting stand adjourned or should we have it recessed? Because recess just means that everything you've done already is happening, and then you recess it, and then you come back at the special meeting. So I'm wondering if recess might be a better word than adjourn. And then at the next meeting, you just pick up where you left off.
Yeah, because from a staff standpoint, if a motion gets passed before you lose quorum, and you don't pass the confirmatory bylaw, or for us come out of committee of the whole and go back into council, staff will not act upon that. That direction has not been finalized.
And that's kind of what I'm trying to get clarification on is do we, if there's, for example, a time sensitive issue on there, can we act on things within that confirmatory bylaw? Obviously, the clerk in Ottawa is a lawyer, so we lean on him quite a bit. So I just, and I don't have that clarification right now, but as it stands right now, staff wouldn't be able to act on it. And
If you're going to do it, and ask forgiveness. No,
Yeah.
I'm teasing.
Is the confirmatory bylaw part of the municipal act that it must happen? I think it's become practice,
The act says that everything will be passed by vote.
yes, but if you pass the bylaws in the course of the meeting and then you subsequently pass a confirmatory bylaw, essentially that's approving all of the actions that council has done over the course of the meeting, even though you have specifically passed the previous bylaws ahead of time. In some cases, I think we passed confirmatory bylaws the same set of bylaws, do we not? Yeah. But our municipal council, we passed the bylaws separately. And then at the end of the meeting, we passed confirmatory bylaw. So there's a distinction. The bylaws at our lower tier municipality, we have already passed in council. Presumably they take effect the moment we pass it. Correct. We subsequently pass confirmatory bylaw that passes all of the actions of the council, but it's a duplication of passage.
No, because you may have passed 6 motions that aren't covered by bylaws.
True, that's what
And
the
that's-
confirmatory bylaw does. But the bylaws itself, council has passed, take effect. In this case, in the county council, we passed bylaws, including the confirmatory bylaw, all at one time.
So just
Correct?
a
Is
quick
that
question then. So when you, okay, so let's say, for example, ones that, types of resolutions that get their own specific bylaws simply because of the legal nature of them are contracts. So when we go to sign a contract, we actually pass a bylaw authorizing the warden and clerk to enter into an agreement with somebody. So I'm questioning when, I haven't looked when South actually passes all of its bylaws, because you wouldn't pass them at the beginning of the meeting, obviously, because you wouldn't want to pass a bylaw to authorize the warden and clerk to enter into an agreement before the actual resolution from the report is read. So I'm just, that's
No,
why ours
well-
are done at the end.
Well, no, we do pass the bylaws near the end of our meeting.
Okay,
But then there is also other bits and pieces, notice of motion and other things that occur, and then we do a confirmatory bylaw at the end. In our case, we've done our bylaws prior to the confirmatory bylaw. Confirmatory bylaw covers motions or other things that business
Yeah.
has been enacted without bylaw necessarily in our township. As I understand the county, we do them all together, including the confirmatory bylaw and all of the bylaws at one reading.
that's correct. And I don't think really there's any difference other than it's a little bit more streamlined when you're doing everything through one motion rather than passing bylaws here through a motion, then doing a little bit more business than passing another motion. It just reduces that need for an additional motion to pass.
It does, but from a procedural standpoint, in the county's state, none of our business is really concluded until we pass the confirmatory bylaw. So if we lose connectivity or lose quorum, 95% of the way through the meeting, the whole meeting stands adjourned until we pass the confirmatory bylaw. In the case of South Frontenac and possibly other lower tier municipalities, some of the work is done over the course of the evening, passing other bylaws or motions. And motions with other bylaws still have effect without passage of the confirmatory bylaw. Would be my understanding of it.
So I think some of that, Al, would be a result of that, maybe the actions that you were during the meeting were covered by, say, a budget that you passed for the Public Works Department, that they brought in a motion to buy a new truck or something. Well, it's covered by budget anyway, so they can move forward with that to confirm the bylaw.
So anyway, it's just a point.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying what we're doing should be any different in the county, I'm just observing that is a different approach that we do at South Frontenac than we do at the county.
So the reason I sort of reached out to the city of Ottawa with my questions was because in my research, I did find one very large municipality when I was looking at their electronic participation and loss of connectivity, and they did have in their procedural bylaw that if connectivity is lost, any motions passed prior to loss of connectivity are covered by the one procedural bylaw, and at the next meeting, the procedural bylaw for that meeting would only cover the ones that weren't passed before connectivity. So that made me think, well, how can you pass a procedural bylaw if you've lost connectivity and you're now closed to the public? So that's why I sort of reached out to the city of Ottawa, because maybe there are provisions that I'm not aware of. Maybe the ombudsman has ruled that I'm not aware of, that if this happens where you're losing connectivity, maybe you are provided with an opportunity or an option to at least as a motion pass a confirmatory bylaw to confirm what's happened up to that point. So that's why I've reached out to the city of Ottawa to get some clarification, because it just threw me for a loop when I saw that in someone's procedural bylaw. So I just reached out to them to get a little bit more clarification.
I think it would be very worthwhile to have that clarification before we conclude this discussion.
And I agree, because, you know, it would be in there in the quorum that any business, you know, approved by council up to that point could be put into that section. So I'm just waiting for them to get back to me, but I certainly will follow up.
Okay, what appears we probably aren't going to be able to include that part of the discussion today before we close to adjourn.
So I can add section 10.3 and 4 of quorum to our next meeting. And then maybe just, I'm just wondering what the committee feels they might want to review up to, for the next meeting, how far do we want to get to? Keeping in mind that I thought we would be very quick for the first 10 sections, given that's just definitions, and that we took 2.5 hours, so. Does 10 sections seem worthwhile, or maybe 12, and then if we get to them all, we get to them all, and if we don't, they'll just carry over to the next meeting?
I'm comfortable with that, and I think if we commit to the 2.5 hours to review, and we get where we get, and if we're able to conclude all of the sections, that's fine. If we're not, then we'll carry it for the next meeting.
So for the next meeting, we'll start at 10 then?
We've got a tiny bit to conclude at 10, I guess, and the rest is.
I'm
No,
sorry.
no, sketch, that's section 10, not 10.
Oh,
Oh, I was
sorry.
gonna say. Okay.
Yeah, so I think we've already looked at section 10.2, changing the 15 minutes to 30. So I'll add that to our options and consideration sheet, that's already been addressed by the committee. I'll also add to that options and consideration sheets, the new section 6.1 and the new 5.2 to clarify the new dates. And then I'll also add what the committee talked about today in terms of criteria around electronic participation and those items. I'll add that to the options and consideration sheet. That way that can be added to your council meeting, sorry, to your meeting for the next month as well. And that just keeps you up to date on what you've done so far. And if there's anything in it that you think we missed or that you give an extra thought to and you don't really like it, then we can certainly look at that as well. But it just allows you to see what you've done.
I like the idea of the yellow highlight. That's a good idea.
Yeah, so the yellow highlighting, really, I wanted to differentiate between what council, what the committee itself came up with and what staff have literally looked at.
So let's look at 10 to 22.
What's that?
Look at sections 10 to 22.
Okay,
The meeting date,
some of those are going to be fairly quick, I think.
January, I guess we're not going to have a December meeting.
No.
Well, I think we looked at it, third Wednesday was going to be December 21st or something,
22nd.
22nd, so.
I'd come down here because Kelly's buying me something for Christmas, I'm sure.
Same thing as last year, only blue this year,
I was afraid of that. I'd have to wear it.
and a size larger.
So it's
For
up
me.
to the committee if you want to meet in December or your other option. I'm sorry, your other option could be, since we are keeping it to 2.5 hours, if you wanted to meet, no, you can't meet after council. Yeah, you can meet after council in December because there is a CAO performance appraisal review committee happening with the four mayors. So if you guys wanted to stick around as well, I think, well, no, we can't. 'cause we need
That's on the
CAO here.
15th, you mean?
Yeah, it wouldn't work after the December meeting because the CAO would not be
Right.
available, and I really don't want to go through this without his guidance either.
Personally, I have no problem with 22nd if we want to meet, unless somebody else has got Christmas holiday planned or something.
there's
Travel.
still days to shop yet, isn't
Hmm?
it? There's still time to shop after the 22nd.
It doesn't take me that long. to
Christmas
prep.
Eve.
Walmart on the 24th.
But if you want to cancel 22nd, it doesn't bother me either.
Normally I can, so I just, sometimes it's nice to have a significant break at Christmas time, but
Christmas is on Sunday this year, so it wouldn't be like a special day.
And the 25th.
Yeah.
what do other members feel? Bruce, who no sense about it.
I'm flexible. If you want to go December, that's fine, or January, doesn't matter.
Well, we have a fairly tight time schedule. We maybe haven't progressed as far as we hoped to. We thought we might do 10 sections of that meeting, and we're falling a little behind.
Well, we have 20.
Um,
28 sections, although the last few are very So there's basically 27 sections. The sections that, and again, as I said, I didn't think it would take that long to get through the first 10, but it did take us 2.5 hours. But the bigger sections that you're going to come up against is section 27, which is the section that deals specifically with committees. So some municipalities have a separate committee bylaw. We just sort of, because we're not that big, just incorporated into ours, but you want to look at committees and the criteria that what committees can and can't do, if there's any changes there. The other thing that might take a little additional time as well is reviewing the committees. Now, there's some committees that we can just disband because they're no longer required, such as the Seniors Housing Task Force, because it was tasked to come up with business plans for each of the townships, and we've done that. So those types of committees can be disbanded. There's legislative committees such as the Planning Committee and the Accessibility Advisory Committee. Then there's the discretionary committee of CDAC, and then there's other committees that are just kind of like what we consider now ad hoc committees, which are the admin task force. But are those committees doing what you want them to do? Staff may have some opinions on how CDAC is working, how planning is working, how accessibility is working, and do we want to make changes around those? Are they still required? Can we roll them all into one? It's more of a conversation with the staff that deal directly with those committees, but we anticipate that could take a day as well.
Well, let's think back, what is our time schedule? We needed to bring this back to county council for June.
I would prefer it coming back to June only because if county council sends the committee back for more thought on certain things because they don't agree with this or that. It could potentially, if it comes to June, it could get the full okay of council and pass. But in the option or likelihood that it could end up coming back, that still gives us July before we can actually pass the full new procedural bylaw, so that we can get those into the packages for any councillors who have submitted their name for nominations to run in the township, so that they're aware of what's happening here as well. So June, that would leave you with January, February, March, April, May.
I think we have sufficient time to go to December meeting, frankly.
Without the December meeting. I have no problem with that.
Okay.
So, well, I don't have a January calendar. What's the third? The fourth Wednesday of the month, right?
26th.
Of January.
Would the group be open to moving it to say the third Wednesday? It's just that Angelique and I have a standing conflict on the fourth Wednesday. We've been moving
I
around.
prefer it was moved up.
County council?
Yeah,
County council.
I have no problem with that at all. It's one last trip for me.
Because I would be away on the 26th.
Are you talking all meetings, moving them to the
Yeah,
third, or
let's
just
move it.
January?
For the third Wednesday from the fourth.
I'm just saying easier for the group and it would be easier for Angelique and I.
For
Because you're
sure.
already here.
I originally thought that you might be here all day doing this, but it seems that the 2.5 hours is working. So for sure, we can just do it right after council if that works.
So the
for everybody.
19th, then we're talking about?
Yeah. And we
Moving-
can get you a cold bowl of soup.
Moving forward.
Sure.
If we do it as a working lunch kind of thing, keep on
Yeah.
moving for about, take a half an hour break or something, but
Yeah, that's
I
right.
don't want to start with your meeting at 1 o'clock for finish county council at 10:30. Or 11, we're sitting for 2 hours waiting.
Just carry on, like we're gonna be here, so.
Yeah, say if we want to have a half an hour break.
Sure.
We'll walk around.
So that's
something's
January
fine, or
the-
whatever.
One last trip down here.
January,
Mighty
the 20 what date?
One last
Sorry,
trip,
Bruce, I don't have the calendar in front of me. It's
Well, Wednesday, 19th is our county council meeting, so.
Wednesday, the 19th. there.
19th?
19th.
Yeah.
January.
January.
That'll work for me. 'Cause I'm away for 3 weeks after the 21st.
Joining electronically, apparently.
Colombia, South America. You let me in?
Sure.
We just have to live with what we decide.
Just bring us back some coffee.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely, because as I said, the reason I had picked the fourth Wednesday was simply because I thought they might be like an all-day meeting and that would just be too much, but it makes much more sense if we're just gonna stick it to the 2.5 hours that we do it directly after council. And we can just put on the agenda that the meeting starts at 11 or immediately following the county council meeting. So that way,
sounds
if
good.
council goes to 10:30, quarter to 11, you can start at 11:50.
Yeah, we did that with the building task force.
And we still may need a meeting of that in January. But we'll know more.
That's good. Saved me a couple hundred kilometers driving, so that's
Yeah.
good.
You need a motion to adjourn this meeting?
Yes, we do.
I'll vote twice.
Move. Move, Bill.
Oh.
All in favor? It's carried, thank you.